in his battle with asthma.
BBC Radio Manchester, satellite weather with Diane Oxbury.
Plenty of cloud cover around as we speak, but over the next few hours we're optimistic that it will start to thin and break, and like yesterday, the best of the weather will manage to come through as you get into the afternoon. The winds are reasonably light, they're coming in from the continent, so with a bit of sunshine it should feel quite warm. Top temperature 13 Celsius.
Allan Beswick with you on the phones. 0161 228 2255.
BBC Radio Manchester.
Aye, all right. Good-o. 0161 228 2255 if you've something to say today. There's a man sitting there today, minding his own business, as it were, just sitting and enjoying the day passing by, thinking, by heck, I wish there was capital punishment. Well, when I say there's a man sitting there, there's quite a lot of men and quite a lot of women saying it generally, but he has a very specific reason for thinking, wouldn't it be a good idea if we still had capital punishment? And that reason is that he murdered the girl. 27 years ago, he murdered the girl. He murdered her. Teresa Di Simone. Murdered, part-time barmaid, full-time dead. I strangled her. I remember doing it, he thinks. I remember doing it. I raped her. And I thought afterwards, oh, God, I'm going to be in some terrible trouble here. I really am going to be in some terrible, terrible trouble. And then they arrest somebody for it. And then they find him guilty. And then 27 years later, they find out he's not guilty. Couldn't have been guilty. In the words of the judge, this decision leaves some important unanswered questions. Perhaps the most important is that we do not know who raped and killed the girl. We can but hope that for the sake of the appellant and the family of the murdered girl, that her killer may yet be identified and brought to justice. And let us hope he is. He's almost certainly a bloke. Let us hope he is. Let us hope so. But if the man who's just done 27 years in jail for the murder of the young lass, Sean Hodgson, if he had been put to death, we'd have never found out. Never had a chance to find out. The police wouldn't have gone rummaging round in the undergrowth, not by any means. And in order to get a DNA sample from him, they'd have had to dug him up. They'd have had to dig him up and get a DNA sample from bits of his corpse that might not have rotted down by then. How can anybody with half a brain cell believe that capital punishment makes sense? Surely nobody can. Nobody can. Surely it can never, ever, in any circumstance, be right.
Eamon and Diane.
It's about fun.
What are you scared of? Balloons?
I'm scared of balloons.
I'm scared of balloons. They're very unpredictable, Eamon. They can bounce in your face.
Yeah, that's the unpredictability of it you don't like, isn't it? Me?
Yeah, very unpredictable.
Eamon and Diane.
It's about Manchester.
One of our callers this morning said they heard a siren going off across Manchester. You haven't got any idea what that would be?
I'll make some inquiries.
Are you assisting us with our inquiries?
How about that? I'm assisting you with your inquiries. You know, this really is an advancement in technology, isn't it?
It's about Eamon and Diane.
Give it a try.
Eamon O'Neill, Diane Oxbury.
Tomorrow morning from 6.
BBC Radio Manchester.
Here's a question for you. Sean Hodgson has spent 27 years in jail for a crime he didn't commit. Now, he did plead guilty. Well, no. He pled guilty under questioning. We don't know the nature of that questioning. Well, certainly I don't. But he pled guilty, and then he withdrew his plea and pled not guilty at the court. And the court, well, frankly, the court heard all sorts of evidence, but in the end, the jury believed that he was the murderer. There's no way am I having a go at the jury, but you have to wonder about the evidence collectors. You have to wonder about the police, don't you, really? What would you say? And how much do you think he should now be compensated? Because that's the other thing, isn't it? He's had 27 years of his life stolen from him. How much should he be compensated? He's 57 years of age. He's not the sharpest knife in the pack, that's for sure. He's got mental problems. Some of them, I suspect, brought on by prison. Some of them, judging by his confession to something he didn't do, were there already. How much should he get? What's it worth? Nothing will compensate him, will it? Nothing will make him say, well, that was worth it. That was fantastic. Yeah, I mean, 27 years, but look at me now. It's got to be a lottery win, hasn't it? It's got to. If it's any less than £1 million, if it's any less than £1 million, then justice has not, by any stretch of the imagination, been attempted at being done. What do you say? And look at the world he comes out to. Where was he 27 years ago? We were at the Falklands War. We were. 27 years ago was the Falklands War. I presume he knows it's over. They tend to be up with the news in prison with his colour telly. So I presume he knows it's over. I presume he knows what's going on, but I bet he doesn't know what it's like now. I bet he doesn't know that if you were sitting minding your own business having a meal in a restaurant and somebody 3 tables down got stabbed, yeah, I bet he doesn't know that most people would just ignore it. It's probably like that in prison, but you wouldn't expect that in the streets of our cities, would you? But that's what's happened recently. Yeah, that's exactly what's happened recently. Somebody was stabbed to death, and the other diners simply ignored it. Diners at a burger bar. A Burger King, no less. And this is ours. This is not, you know, them dirty southerners. This is us, this. Diners at a Burger King carried on eating as they watched a fellow customer getting stabbed. Some even filmed the attack on their mobile phones rather than step in. Well, at least they've got a bit of evidence. A member of staff said they kept wolfing down food. What these people did was inhuman, and children were there. The 33-year-old victim was seriously ill in hospital last night after being knifed 6 times in the arm and stomach. Cops think a row broke out at the Pat Burger Bar in Manchester city centre on Saturday. They appealed for anyone with mobile footage to come forward. Were you in that bar? I don't know which one it was, even. I know the name of it, but there's a few of them knocking about. Were you in that bar? What would you have done? I'm not sure I would have done. Have you ever witnessed a serious crime? I'm not talking about a bloke overtaking you on the motorway when you're doing 70. That's happened to me dozens of times, and to be perfectly honest, I've probably overtaken people who are doing 70 on the motorway. We might as well own up why we're here. If the cops ask me, I'll deny it, obviously. You lie your way out, unlike Mr. Hodgson, who lied his way in. Not a good policy. But have you ever witnessed a serious crime? How were you treated? How did the coppers treat you? Donkeys years ago, when I was I must have been about 14, 15, I witnessed a road traffic accident. If somebody died in it, you know, it takes at least one corpse for the coppers to be interested in a road traffic accident, doesn't it? Unless they can get someone for drink driving, they love them. Oh, they're their favourite. But dead's a good one as well. So if there's a corpse, then, you know, that's fine. It's worth turning out. They don't like turning out for anything less than a dead person. So out come the cops. And I rang 999, got the ambulance, got the police, got all that, and then tried to help. I was only a kid, it made me learn first aid. Tried to help, and wasn't very good at helping, but got one person out the car. Nothing heroic. I opened the door and they stepped out, no seatbelt even. So out they got, and that was fine. And it was the other car where the corpse was, so I wasn't involved in that. And then, a few weeks later, police car turns up at our house. My mum thought I was in trouble again. So I got a slap off my mother. Police car pulled up outside our house. Smack. Well, it was a reasonable bet, you might think. Anyway, what have you done now, sort of attitude? What have you done now? I've not done anything. Well, why is there a policeman outside the house? He could be going anywhere. He's coming here. Look, he's at the gate. Anyway, they wanted me to make a statement, which I did. And the other thing that happened was they kept trying to tell me what to say. I was quite cross about that. They kept trying to tell me what to say. Not the only time it's happened to me. But has it happened to you? They kept trying to say, well, the street lighting was very good, wasn't it? And I said, no, the street lighting's awful. It was Poplars Avenue in Wallington. It was those, do you remember those orange fluorescent type lights we used to have. They were rubbish. They were absolute rubbish. You couldn't see anything black. You just couldn't see it. And one of the cars was black, so I said that. And they said one of them was going too fast, wasn't he? And I said, I've absolutely no idea. How can I know? I didn't look till I heard him go bang. And they'd both stopped by then. But he said, well, you know, the damage indicates that at least one of them was going fast. Which do you think it is? And I said, I don't know. And they just crashed into each other. I'd passed the scene by then, or past the place where they collided, so I heard a bang and turned round. That's it. That's all I know. I didn't even notice the car going up Poplars Avenue towards the accident, as it were, before the accident happened. I didn't even notice that. You know, it's Poplars Avenue, for God's sake. You walk along there at night, there's 20 or 30 cars will go past you. You don't think, oh, look, there's a car. Oh, look, there's a car. Oh, look, there's a car. I did when I was 3 and there weren't many cars, but I was about 15. There were quite a lot by then. But they tried to get me to say the things that they wanted me to say. They tried to get me to, if you like, confirm what was going on. Now, OK, it was a driving without due care, at best. I never found out more because I never got called to court. Probably because I wouldn't say what they wanted me to say. Or probably because there was no damn use. But they tried to get me to. Now, imagine that it was a murder. Imagine it was a murder. Imagine it was something really, really significant. I know somebody died in that and it was significant for his family. I seem to remember it was a bloke. It was significant for his family. And it was significant for the bloke in the other car because he's killed somebody and that's no pleasant thing for the rest of your life unless you're some kind of monster. So it was important, but it wasn't a murder. It wasn't a rape. So would they do it if it was? The evidence from 27 years ago, and I don't just mean the case today, all sorts of cases. Stephen Kishko springs to mind. The case, I've forgotten the name of the victim now, and even the for years believed to be killer in Bakewell. Do you remember that one? That was about the same time, wasn't it? And this wasn't much sooner. Well, this was a lot sooner than that, to be honest. But it is extraordinary. In those days, I haven't had any dealings with the police other than interviewing them rather than interviewing me recently, but in those days, the police seemed to create a picture in their imagination and then get the witnesses to fill in the blanks. Have you ever been a witness, or indeed questioned by the police as a suspect? What was the experience like for you? I found it uncomfortable as a kid. 0161 228 2255. John in Wigan. Hiya, John.
I rang you last week, Alan, and mentioned about those knives in bars. I wonder if he was stabbed by a knife that was supplied by the establishment he was eating in.
Oh, you mean? Well, I don't. Not in the kind of restaurant we're talking about, because they'd have been plastic. So probably not. But
maybe I'll get out of that. That bloke who did 27 years.
Yeah.
You should have hung him for being an idiot anyway.
We don't hang idiots in our country at the moment. I mean, we may get round to it, but.
Okay, Alan.
All right, mate. Cheers now. I mean, he should have hanged him for being an idiot, but he's not an idiot. He's got a mental illness. It's an entirely different thing. There is being an idiot, you can be the brightest man on the planet. I mean, a lot of people thought George Bush was an idiot. Personally, I don't have a view. I never met him. A lot of people thought he was an idiot, but he wasn't. He was a clever man. George Bush was as bright as a tack in some respects. They don't elect idiots. They think they'd like to. He did all right. Yeah. Little bit of help from his brother, presumably a little bit of help from his dad, and yes, he'd had his moments on the darker side of life. Kevin says, Alan, knowing full well what your response would be, I wrote this message before you made your comments. By your reckoning, the so-called cellar monster Fritzl may not have ever raped his daughter. Unless the juries were there to witness it in person, of course. So says Kevin. Well, yeah, is the simple answer. In the great world, can you absolutely double dog, as we say, guarantee that it happened? No. You have testimony that is very, very, very believable. And indeed, you have a man who's now changed his plea to say, yes, I did what I am being accused of. fine. And if they had it in Austria, he would undoubtedly be put to death. Undoubtedly. But she'd still have 7 kids, 1 dead. She'd still have spent a big chunk of her life living underground. There would still be children who hadn't seen daylight for the whole of their lives. And in truth, the death of Josef Fritzl would have changed absolutely nothing. The man is crackers. Without a doubt, he is absolutely crackers. He has needed all his life mental help, because of his mental health condition. And right now, there is percolating away in somebody's mind exactly what percolated in Fritzl's. He wasn't the first to do what he did. He was certainly the worst by degree, but he wasn't the first, and it's probably happening as we speak. Putting him to death won't stop it happening again. 12:20 on BBC Radio Manchester. What you got to say for yourself today? Mark Edwardson's got the headlines.
The Court of Appeal has quashed the conviction of a man who served 27 years behind bars for a murder he didn't commit. The number of people out of work's topped 2 million for the first time in 12 years. And as you've just heard, Josef Fritzl, the Austrian man accused of imprisoning his daughter in a cellar for 24 years and having 7 children with her, has admitted all the charges against him, including murder. Manchester's weather, sunny spells and highs of 13 Celsius.
BBC Radio Manchester, 2020 traffic.
Well, let's take a look firstly to traffic on the A556 around the A530. There's a broken down lorry closing off the carriageway. That abnormal load's broken down on the King Street roundabout, and that's on the Chesterbound carriageway. The diversion takes you via Northwich onto King Street, down to Manchester Road, then through Kingsmead. Don't forget, it's still foggy on the M62 between 19 Haywood and 22 Rishworth Moor. That fog's quite dense in places, so do take care. And if you have any updates for me, it's 0161 244 4951. I'm Cara Banks.
Decongesting Manchester, one car at a time. 2020 traffic. BBC Radio
Manchester. A very good day to you. Are you? Prince William. Yeah, him, tall fella, blonde hair. Yeah, nice voice. Prince William has spoken about his childhood dream of becoming a policeman. His charity work. And now he got his Harry Potter scar in an exclusive interview with a young cancer patient broadcast today. I don't know where it was broadcast or care. Probably CBBBBBBBBBBBs. You know that that awful children. I know it's not aimed at me, but that awful children's channel the BBC threatens you with. CBBBBBs. But the Prince said he was following in his mother's footsteps. Well, she wasn't a copper. I mean, I didn't know everything about Diana, but I don't remember ever saying, hello, yeah. I don't. She didn't. She was tall enough, I'll grant you, but she wasn't a copper. What's he on about? The Prince said he was following in his mother's footsteps by lending his support to the plans for a new children's and teenage cancer centre at the Royal Marsden Hospital. As I say, this was CBBBBBBBBBBBB News Round. It was on that, or it will be. The Prince, now 26 years old. That bloke was in prison for all his life. Anyway, the Prince's life, that is. The Prince, now 26, undertook work experience at the Children's Unit in 2005, do you remember? And was appointed president of the world-renowned cancer hospital in 2007. I mean, whatever else we get out the royal family, they're very good, aren't they, at sort of drawing... I don't know how to phrase this, but being the figurehead of charitable endeavour. Now, whether they're worth that or not is another story, but they are. You know, if a charity gets a royal to turn up, then they do pretty damn good out of it, don't they? And the royals got to go somewhere. You know, they've got 365 days every year they've got to fill their time with. And frankly, most of it, I suppose, they're sat there having a good time. But when they do get their act together, and they're asked, they go out and meet people, and just by meeting people, they draw attention to the issue. At the end of today, loads of people will have donated money to the Royal Marsden. Now, hopefully, personally, being a selfish sort, I'd prefer they donated it to Christie. If you're going to donate money to hospitals and you're from here, then donate it to Christie or any of the other hospitals around here. Don't bother giving it the Marsden. We got people up here. But he added, and since doing that 1/8 work experience, 3/8, I don't know what those mean. Since doing that work experience, I've learnt so much and met so many incredible people. So that's nice. Joe in Rossendale. Hiya, Joe.
Hello, Alan. Are you all right, mate?
I'm very well.
Nice to speak to you. I spoke to you a couple of times before in the past.
Right.
You're talking about the police and what have you.
Yeah.
Just a couple of quick stories I thought you might want to know about. I won't go into detail too much, you might give things away as such, but once I was working over in Ancoats, the Ancoats Collier sort of area of Manchester, and I am an engineer, so I get into places where, like, you know, up on roofs and stuff, running cables and things where you wouldn't normally get.
Yeah.
And I forget, it must have been one Saturday morning I was in on overtime, or one Sunday, whatever the day was, I can't remember exactly. And I was running these cables, and I looked across the roof, and I could obviously see some equipment that I would describe as breaking-in equipment, i.e. bolt cutters and a big hammer and a big screwdriver, you know the type of stuff, Alan, on this roof. Yeah?
Tools to go.
Yeah.
Tools to go equipped with, as it happens. But go on, yes.
Well, exactly. It was everything was there except the swag bag and the black mask. Anyway, I put these things in a plastic bag, as you would do, you know, carefully, let's say. And just very quickly, I brought them down to Collier's police station. And I went in the thing there, you know what you do, and I went to the counter, and this chap answered, and I said, oh, I said, yeah, can I help you? I said, yeah, I said, basically run the thing past him, what had just happened.
Yeah.
And he turned to me, Alan, he said, I swear, kid me not, he said to me, that's very good of you to do that. He said, but you don't mind running it up to Bootle Street, do you, mate?
No, he never.
I said, Alan, as true as I'm sat here, strike me dead if I tell you a word of a lie. He said to me,
well, that is extraordinary.
He said, you don't mind taking it to Bootle Street. He says, we can't deal with it at this station this moment in time. If you don't mind taking it to Bootle Street, they'll take all the details off you. Now, that was just one occasion.
What did you do? Did you tell him where to shove
it? I just threw it on the desk. I just said, well, I'm sorry, mate, I haven't got the time. In fact, Alan, what peed me off, excuse the French,
it's all right.
was I'd actually used my lunchtime to go and bloody do that.
So he was already 1-0 down when he walked through the door, wasn't he?
That was it. Just very, very quickly, Alan, the second occasion was... I was on occasion working away from home, and my wife was at home, and I got a phone call, blah, blah, blah. The car's been stolen. Now, I weren't really bothered too much. It was an bit of an old dog of a car, an old Cortina, but it had all my tools in the back, so I was a little bit peed about that.
Yeah.
So anyway, I made inquiries with the police, blah, 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 and about a week later, I got, I can't remember, there was a letter and a phone call, and it said, we've located your car, and I said, that's great, when can I pick it? He said, well, you can't pick it up, mate. I said, why is that? He said, at the moment, it's being used in a serious crime down in somewhere like Birmingham or Coventry somewhere. But we will keep you posted as of to and when, you know, when you can collect it type thing. So I thought, well, that's okay. At least it's in safe hands. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So a week or two went by. I can't remember exactly how long. And I got a letter through the post from some police division down south, wherever it was, Coventry or Birmingham, and it was basically saying, without going into the details, that these villains, if you want, had been apprehended and were being dealt with, but my vehicle was unfortunately lost.
What do you mean,
my vehicle
lost?
I can't remember the words exactly, but it was basically saying, your vehicle's lost, it's been misplaced during the course of the investigation, and we're very sorry.
They've lost a Cortina.
They've lost my Cortina. It was in observation.
It takes a bit of work, that, doesn't it, really?
Well, I wouldn't mind, but they wrote to me and told me that they'd observed where it was, and it was being used in a serious crime, so I'm thinking, well, I'm not following it up. You know, it's in the hands of the police.
You can rely on the police, yeah, they're a fine, upstanding body of persons.
Well, I'm going to do something now. I'm going to do something now, Alan, that you don't like.
Go on.
I'm going to say hello to my mate Glenn.
No, yeah, that's cruel. a cruel and wicked swine.
You fell for that one, Alan.
I did indeed. Good day to you, Joe.
Take care, mate.
Tara, now we don't like him. Put a mark next to him, will you? We don't like him at all. And we've gone well off him. And some. Have you any idea? Oh, this is a good question. I don't know the answer to this. Have you any idea what the record is for the longest time taken for someone to be brought to justice and convicted since committing the crime? I'm going to make a stab at some of the Nazi war criminals, because that's like 60 plus, isn't it? That's heading out towards 70 years. And there's one arrested in the United States last week before, can't remember which. But there was a chap arrested in the United States as a potential Nazi war criminal. So that's fairly long. I can't think of any. Does anybody know? I bet somebody does. Now, we're not getting into, we may find out who killed Lindau Mann, and that's like 700 years ago. So if we find out who did that, then that's probably the record. Or Mark Antony didn't do Julius Caesar. So that's 2,000 years. It wasn't Mark Antony. It was some copper who couldn't be bothered writing his full name down, so he wrote M. Antony. Turns out it was Michael Antony. Exactly. So we're not counting those. We're talking about, well, they were both real crimes, weren't they? But I think you know what I mean. We're talking about that. I mean, that woman was found the other day and reburied. That had her head buried alongside her. Now not side her, beside her. Oh, dear God, what's up with you all today? Anyway, and I don't like cider. Anyway, I don't know. It's a good question. Does anybody know the answer? As I say, I can't think of any longer. I mean, think about it, really. 70 years. Now, we've not brought Mark Antony to justice. I think Caesar and his cronies did that. And we're not going to be able to bring Lindau Peters, we used to call him, Pete Bog. We're not going to bring anybody to justice for that. So they have to be alive at the time that they're caught and brought to the courts. And I can't think of any. There have been. I mean, imagine if they now found out who actually committed the murder that this bloke's been locked up in Pokey for 27 years for. That'd be up there with a chance. If we're talking about, well, it's a wrong phrase again, but ordinary crime, I don't know. If we're talking about crime in its broadest sense, then crimes against humanity are included, and we've got to go with, I would think, there's not going to be anything longer than that, really, than the Nazi war criminals. Can't think of one. Can you? 0161 228 2255. We all read the papers, don't we? These things lodge in your mind somewhere, don't they? Like a fishing hook, clunk to the back of your brain. You sort of remember them. I can't remember any of any merit. Steve in Wigan says, I agree with you 1,000% about capital punishment, but what annoys me, says Steve, is that none of the police that put that lad away 27 years ago, or the police that put Stephen Kishko away, ever get punished for getting it wrong or fitting them up. Well, I don't think anybody did in the Stephen Kishko case, and I have no idea whether anybody will in this case. But there have been cases where police officers, a long time after their, should we say, illegal policing, have ended up locked up. There was where was it? There was the West Yorkshire Police. There's a big row going on at the moment. You know, I've not seen it, but there's a programme on television called Red Riding. And I've not seen it. Lots have, and I'm told it's very good, but I just haven't, so that's that. And the West Yorkshire Police, or the Yorkshire Police, are going absolutely balmy, saying, oh, no, policing's not like that, fitting people up and all that. Oh, no. Well, it was, wasn't it? It was. Oh, God, yes. West Yorkshire Police, do you remember? They were a nasty bit. A long time ago, but they were a very nasty group of people. And also, was it in the Midlands? Was there another one in the Midlands where they were at it? And some of those, of course, were eventually brought to justice, as they say. Now, whether they were locked up for a long time is another matter, but they were brought to justice. So I suppose they count as well. But once again, I can't think of anybody beyond the Nazi war criminals. 70 years, give or take a fortnight, is frankly quite a long time. If we're going for people who are like they say, still alive. What was the name of that guy, the Beast of Somewhere? They're all called the Beast of Somewhere, aren't they? But the Beast of Somewhere or other, who was locked up in France about 5 years ago. Now, he was 80-odd, so he was committing his crimes 60 years earlier. Well, it had been 50 years earlier at the time, I suppose, but he was committing his crimes against humanity 50 years ago. So for there to be anybody longer than that today, it would have to be a pre-war crime. And the chances of somebody committing a crime before the Second World War in the United Kingdom and then being brought to justice now, I think, are pretty slim, don't you? Pretty slim. What we do find is that people who are locked up, we discover that they didn't do it. And on the subject of someone who now is prepared to admit that he did do it, it's the trial of Joseph Fritzl, which is coming to a head right now. He stands accused of imprisoning his daughter for 24 years in a cellar beneath his home in Amstetten, raping her over 3,000 times, fostering 7 children with her, and murdering one of them. The murder... He didn't actually murder the child. He failed to get help that would have saved the child's life. But as someone in charge of the situation, then, frankly, that constitutes murder if you don't get help that could be got. And today, he originally denied 2 of the charges, the most serious ones, but he's changed that plea now to guilty, which I hope means that he'll go to prison for a very, very, very long time. Very extraordinary. I don't quite understand that, so I'm not going to read it. Very strange. 0161 228 2255. I'm not reading out something that I don't understand. No claim to the longest, but here's a starter for 10, says Roy. Rachel Nickell's killer. Of course. Just recently, earlier this year, back end of last year, Rachel Nickell's killer was brought to justice 16 years after she was killed. You see, it does go on. They don't ever close a crime file, a serious crime file. They don't close any. They're always prepared to go back and look. And I suspect there'll be a bit of going back and looking in the case of this fellow who's just been released. They're going to go back and look at the evidence and see whether any of the other suspects, assuming they had them, first of all seeing whether there were other suspects, and then if they do establish that they are, then following up on them. And, of course, there's going to be a sweep of the DNA database. They've got the DNA of the person who they think will have done it. Now, they haven't got the person, but they've got the DNA. So now there will be a sweep of the DNA database. So if you've ever been involved with the police recently, in the last 3 or 4 years, and you've given your DNA, right now there's a copper looking at it to see if you did that murder. Yes, you are, at the moment, not a suspect for the murder. That would state it far too strongly. But right now, if you've ever given your DNA to the police, because unlike fingerprints, they're entitled to keep it. Yeah, well, I've got a view as well, but there you are. But if you've ever given your... Well, you need to be a bloke, probably. But if you're... Well, for obvious reasons. But if you've ever given your DNA to the police, right now, in the next day or week, or maybe it'd take as long as a year to get to you, but they will at some point during the next 12 months be looking at you or something from you, your DNA, to see if you were the murderer. Does that make you feel more secure or less secure? Tricky, isn't it? I mean, if they find the true murderer via that process, then I suppose we will all cheer. And if so doing, when we're all cheering, if we then say, well, this is a good result with modern technology, is it worth the small, but nonetheless real, curtailment of our freedom to have our DNA back when we've been eliminated from the inquiries, or indeed we've had the police have said, no, we've done the DNA test and it won't you, Gov. Here's your DNA back, like they do with fingerprints. But no, they get to keep it. And as I say, in the next 12 months, if they don't find someone sharpish, your DNA will be on the big, long, million list of people whose DNA will be checked. They'll see whether you killed that woman. So if you did, look out. If you are the person and you like to confess, well, I'm doing nothing for the next hour and 20 minutes. 0161 228 2255. 20 to 1 on BBC Radio Manchester. News headlines. Mark Edwardson.
The Court of Appeal has quashed the conviction of a man who served 27 years behind bars for a murder he didn't commit. The Conservatives have accused the government of not acting fast enough to stave off rising unemployment, which broke through the 2 million mark. And Ryan Giggs is to get the freedom of the city of Salford. The Mayor says Giggs is a perfect role model for youngsters. Manchester's weather, dry, some sunshine, highs of 13 Celsius.
BBC Radio Manchester 2020 traffic.
Well, let's take a quick look to the cameras on the M62. It's still fairly foggy over the Pennines between junction 19 Haywood and 22 Rishworth Moor. In Northwich, the A556 southbound, the A530, the roundabout there, the King Street roundabout, I'm afraid is closed off because of an abnormal load that's broken down on the Chester-bound side. The diversions take you off via King Street, then onto Manchester Road, then through Kingsmead on the A533. Don't forget that if you can update me, it's 0161 244 4951. I'm Cara Banks.
BBC Radio Manchester Sports with Dennis Lloyd.
Hello, good afternoon. The Oldham Chief Executive Alan Hardy has played down reports that John Wardle could be linking up with manager Joe Royle and getting involved with Oldham Athletic. Hardy's told BBC Radio Manchester that any interest from the former Manchester City chairman would be welcome, but reports of planned formal talks and investment from Wardle is premature. Royal, meanwhile, has continued to shape his Oldham squad, securing the long-term future of Chris Taylor. The highly rated winger has signed a new contract until 2012 and comes after the Latics rejected bids for the player in January. Ipswich goalkeeper Shane Supple will today complete a loan deal until the end of the season at Boundary Park. Bolton midfielder Mark Davis will be out of action for several weeks after injuring his knee in Saturday's defeat against Fulham. Manager Gary Megson is uncertain as to how long he'll be sidelined, but is hopeful he'll be back by the end of the season. The Hull City manager Phil Brown says he stands by his comments that he saw Cesc Fabregas spit at his assistant Brian Horton after last night's FA Cup defeat at Arsenal. Horton plans to speak to the League Managers Association about the alleged incident in the tunnel, and Brown says the club will back him if he decides to take the matter further.
Brian Horton is the assistant manager of Hull City and will receive the full support of the people of Hull. That includes my chairman, who I've had a long conversation with this morning. Do you want to make a mountain out of a molehill? Do you want to make a big deal of it? That's entirely your business. As far as we're concerned, we'll go down the right channels, right direction for to support Brian Horton.
Peter Thompson has returned to light training with Stockport as he continues his recovery from injury. Thompson has been out since January after suffering a collapsed lung, but hopes to be back in the first team before the end of the season. Manchester United goalkeeper Edwin van der Sar has turned down the chance to come out of international retirement. Holland boss Bert van Marwijk has revealed he contacted the 38-year-old about playing in their World Cup qualifier against Scotland on Saturday week. Manchester City defender Nader Manua believes he's benefiting from an unbroken run in the first team. The 22-year-old is currently enjoying his longest stint in the back four after recovering from thigh and knee injuries.
When you're in the team, you find yourself developing more, and you just keep yourself out of the treatment room basically through, like you play games and then you'll be recovering throughout the week, as opposed to say just continually trying to raise your fitness levels just so you can peak for the weekend, even if you're not going to play. So it's a different side to the game now, which I'm experiencing, and it seems to be all right.
It's been announced this morning that triple Olympic champion and world record holder Usain Bolt will compete in a street sprint in Manchester in May. It'll be a 150-metre event on the same weekend as the Manchester 10-kilometre run. Organiser David Hart told us.
It's going to be on the afternoon of Sunday the 17th of May. We will be laying a special tartan track onto the streets of Manchester. We'll have two semi-finals and a final, and we'll have some of the best sprinters in the world competing against him, and some of Britain's finest as well, as they prepare for 2012.
Salford second-row forward Ian Sibbett has avoided a ban after testing positive for a banned substance. The 28-year-old former Warrington player has been reprimanded by the Rugby Football League for overuse of the drug salbutamol in his battle with asthma. Warrington says they're standing by under fire Matt King. The Australian centre apologised yesterday for making a hand gesture at Wolves fans during Saturday's heavy defeat at Harlequins. Club captain Adrian Morley says that left the whole team down, but desperate to do better.
The boys are very much hurting after the loss. It was quite embarrassing, to be honest with you. So the boys are pretty desperate to get out there and try and make amends. And rugby league in this day and age is all about confidence and momentum, and we've got neither at the moment.
And England manager Martin Johnson has named an unchanged team to play Scotland in Saturday's Calcutta Cup showdown, despite injury concerns over fly half Toby Flood and flanker Joe Worsley. It means Sales, Andrew Sheridan and Mark Cueto once again start at Twickenham.
The next live action on the Northwest's biggest sports station.
There's City in the FA Youth Cup tonight, then commentary tomorrow on City's UEFA Cup tie with Aalborg after Rugby League Extra from 6.
BBC Radio Manchester.
Have you lost your job recently? Thousands have. Thousands have. 165,000 to be precise over the last 3 months. Probably more than that because, of course, some people will also get a new job. I know a bloke lost his job, got another within 3 days. Very fortunate. Very, very fortunate. Very unusual in the current climate. So it's at least 165,000. I ask because official figures show that the total of jobless, as we call them, people seeking work, rose to over 2 million for the first time in 12 years. 165,000 over the last 3 months have lost their jobs and not found another one, bringing the overall rate of unemployment in our country to 6.5%. Well, today, in the House of Commons, the Prime Minister, Gordon Brown, expressed his personal regret to the unemployed. Does that make you feel better? If you're one of the 165,000 who have lost your job in the last 3 months, and there but for the grace of, there could be any of us, really, couldn't there? You know, it could so easily be us. The number of times people say, well, at least I'm safe, and the next thing they know, they've gotten the cards. So are you one of them, and do you feel better now that Gordon Brown has expressed his personal regret? It's getting on for 10 to 1. Alan, longest travesty of justice. How about Neville Chamberlain, 1939? I have in my hand a peace treaty signed by the German Chancellor, Herr Hitler. Oh, Derek, thank you for that. Now, this chappie... By the way, when you text, will you put your name on it? I mean, we know who you are because we've got your number from the text, obviously. But will you put your name on it just to give us something to go at? Anyway, last week I got a text from a bloke who said, why is it that the prosecution always start in criminal cases? Well, actually, we don't have prosecution in any of the cases, but why is it that the prosecution always start and the defence always go last? And the reason I gave, and it is the reason I gave was that the principle in British criminal justice is you are innocent until proven guilty. So it is the job of the prosecution to prove you guilty of the crime. If they fail to do so, you remain and continue as innocent. And in truth, if they don't present a good enough case, and it has happened in criminal courts, the barrister for the defence will get up and say, Your Honour, I don't think the prosecution have proven their case. I move to dismiss. And very rarely, but it does happen, a judge will say, I agree with you. And the case is thrown out. But the jury, is instructed to bring back a not guilty verdict. So that's why the prosecution goes first. Why am I telling you? Well, because he's texted again. He says, Alan, I have to admit it was naive of me not to realise the obvious regarding why it's the prosecution counsel who starts the ball rolling. However, I challenge your comment that at the start of play the defence have nothing to defend. they will have some insight about much of the evidence that will be presented against them, and will have a good idea of how to set about refuting it before the start of the case, and in some cases may be confident that they can refute the charges without the prosecution saying a word. Well, yes, but they would first of all, if the defence say, well, frankly, he was in bed with his wife and the Pope at 9 o'clock on the evening of the murder. And we've got witnesses. We've got his wife, and we're flying the Pope over when he's finished railing on about condoms, right? So we've got him coming, and his wife, not the Pope's wife, obviously, he's not got one. But there you are. So that's who they've got. So they're coming over to be our witnesses. But at that moment, as far as the court is concerned, we don't know what time the offence took place. We don't know. Because no evidence has been presented to the jury. The jury haven't a clue. The jury have no idea what the offence was, other than he's charged with murder. They have no idea when it took place. They don't even know how the person died. They have no idea. And they're not allowed to have any idea. So, again, he would be standing up and saying, I can't possibly have done what nobody's said I did. I can't possibly have done what nobody's said I did because I was in bed with the Pope at the time. What time? We'll ask the jury. What time? OK, you were in bed with the Pope. Doesn't happen a lot. I know, you were in bed with the Pope and your wife. Fine. But, well, we don't know. So, no, I'm sorry. You cannot defend against the allegation until the allegation has been made. And in court, it hasn't been made until the prosecution make it. Lord above, how hard is it? How the world turns. We now have a Tory party concerned about the level of unemployment. I remember when that same party thought unemployment was a price worth paying to get us out of recession. It was said that Thatcher considered unemployment was the answer to the problem, rather than the problem. Alan, didn't someone finally get convicted of the crime Stefan Kishko was sent down for? I don't remember. I don't remember somebody getting convicted. Maybe they did. Anyway, there you go. Thank you for that. And the Tories were concerned about unemployment. Do you remember that great big poster campaign at the election where it said, dead straightforward, Labour is not working? A very, very clever poster, if I may say so. I think it was one of the Saatchi-wallahs that come up with that, but they said Labour's not working, and then there was this photograph of a dirty, great big long line of people signing on, or in the dole queue, or what have you. So, yeah, they did care about unemployment.
This is the Northwest's biggest sports station.
BBC Radio Manchester.
The road to Istanbul continues tomorrow night. Manchester City take a 2-0 lead into the second leg of their last 16 UEFA Cup tie against Aalborg.
Great goal by Felipe Caicedo, and it's gone in! Shaw Wright Phillips with a super shot!
There's full match commentary from Denmark after Rugby League Extra.
Manchester Sports, tomorrow evening from 6. BBC Radio Manchester.
Have you heard who's coming in here tomorrow? Joan Bakewell. Dame Joan Bakewell. Yeah, I know. Oh, fabulous. Dame Joan Bakewell is coming in tomorrow to work here. Don't know how much she's getting. Probably more than me, but then so does everybody else. Dame Joan Bakewell is coming in to produce Heather Stott. She'll be in here when I arrive. At the moment, there's only Stotty. But she'll be it. Dame Joan Bakewell will be wandering about the place. And men will have their tongues hanging out. Men of a certain age. And quite a few younger ones, too. She's lovely, by all accounts. I've never met her. Maybe I will tomorrow. Maybe she'll say, well, look at you. You're lovely. I doubt it, but she might. It'll give me dreams tonight, if nothing else. Anyway, Dame Joan Bakewell is on BBC Radio Manchester tomorrow. For yes, she is producing our beloved Ms. Stott from 9 till 12 tomorrow. Not to be missed. Not to be missed. And on Saturday, do you know loads of people are interested in local history. It's probably the biggest subject of study in the country. Probably. I wouldn't put my life on it, but frankly, it's got to be up there with many. Well, the Manchester Histories Festival. I didn't know you could have a plural of history, but there you are. The Manchester Histories Festival takes place in the Town Hall, Manchester Town Hall, on Saturday. There are exhibits, obviously, there are tours, films, music, and stories of Greater Manchester's incredible past, and incredible is what it has been. Well, from 11 o'clock on Saturday morning, BBC Radio Manchester will be there, and you can hear it. If you can't get down there, if you can get down there, all to the good. But if you can't get down there and you're interested in local history, then frankly, dip your bread. Tune in to us. Well, be all right. It's 5 to 1. Gordon Brown was asked specifically about the sharp rise in unemployment. So says Howard in Denton via email. He was asked specifically about the sharp rise in unemployment, and he responded as you stated. However, he also made clear that the government are making £1.3 billion available to assist those currently seeking employment. Surely you should be focusing on the assistance rather than just a rudimentary comment he was almost obliged to offer. Well, you may be right in that, Howard, you may be right indeed. But the thing that I was playing, if you will, was that there's a lot of pressure on Gordon Brown at the moment to apologise for his role, his alleged role, if you will, in the downfall of the world economy. Gordon Brown says, we did everything right, it's them dirty, stinking Yanks. Although, frankly, as I said yesterday, when he was in the White House, he seemed to say that rather less emphatically. But that's his view, or his published view. David Cameron has already apologised, saying, I'm sorry that the Conservative Party didn't see the problems coming. So that's what he's saying. Fair enough, that's his view. And so he's apologised, and now there's pressure on Gordon Brown to apologise. And the point I was making when I read out the piece was that every time he speaks about the matter, he gets nearer to an apology, but never actually says, I'm sorry, just like on this occasion he did not. On the topic of travesties of justice, what about all the years you've been on the radio? There must be a case here for an indictment against you for crimes against broadcasting, surely. Well, you're probably right, Brian, but we're doing our best not to let anyone else find out. No, I'm not reading that out. No, I'm not. Somebody's just sent me a joke about Joan Bakewell's name, which I think she may well have heard loads and loads of times. And I'm not reading it out because I don't think she's above giving a boy a slap. So, frankly, I'm not taking the risk. 0161 228 2255, Radio Manchester at bbc.co.uk. And David in Sales says the murderer of Leslie Molseed, was proven to be Ronald Castry after DNA was compared to the database samples. You see, you stand and you correct me, and there's nothing wrong with that. Or at least you inform me. Well, that's fair, isn't it? I spout, you correct. That's how the world works. Did you see that the Metropolitan Police Chief, as is the wont these days, I actually get fed up of this. When you see it on those crime programmes on the telly, police crime action and all that kind of stuff. And of course, you imagine you're driving down the road minding your own business at 120 mile an hour with 4 police cars chasing after you. And then when they catch you, they've got your fizzog on camera. And I think that's a swizz. I think it's a bit of a duffer. They're not allowed, they don't use it in evidence or like that, but they put it all over the telly and everything. I think it's unacceptable, but there you are. Well, so often these days, when they're doing a big raid, they invite the press to go with them, and television cameras and all that, because they want to demonstrate to the world at large that the police really are looking after us all. Oh yes, they're doing a fantastic job. Look, they're raiding this person's house. So it's a big raid in the London area, and the big cheese went along to demonstrate that he's down there with the boys. Chief arrests suspect. So they get there with a battering ram, batter down the door in the old pile, only to discover that the man they were looking for had already been arrested earlier and was in custody. And you think, well, there you are. You've got the press there to show how clever you are. Turns out, you're a bunch of cretins.
Join me, Becky Once Today, live from Manchester Airport for the best holiday bargains and the latest travel news from 2 on BBC Radio Manchester.
Mind you, nobody's going to Spain, according to the paper this morning. People are saying, no, I'm not going to Spain. A bottle of beer, £5. £5 for a bottle of beer. Won't bother me.
95.1 FM.
DAB Digital Radio.
And the World Wide Web.
This is Manchester.
BBC Radio Manchester.
At 1 o'clock, a man's freed after serving almost 30 years for a murder he didn't commit. And Manchester's faiths come together to challenge the BNP.
Oldham play down reports linking them with a former city chairman.
Well, this afternoon is going to be dry and we will see some sunshine from time to time. Top temperatures, a mild 13 Celsius.
And a problem with line-side equipment in the Stone area means delays of up to 30 minutes between Stoke-on-Trent and Lichfield-Trent Valley for Virgin Trains passengers.
Good afternoon, I'm Mark Edwardson. A man who spent 27 years in prison for a murder he didn't commit has had his conviction quashed. Sean Hodgson, who's now 57, was cleared because DNA evidence showed that he did not rape and strangle a part-time barmaid in Southampton. Speaking outside the High Court in London, Phil McTavish from Hampshire Police said the murder was being re-investigated.
Mr Hodgson was convicted by a jury on evidence which included his own admissions to a clergyman, prison officers and subsequently police. Hampshire Constabulary have consequently started a re-investigation into the murder of Teresa de Simone in Southampton in 1979, and this is aimed at identifying the owner of the new DNA profile.
Unemployment's risen above 2 million for the first time in 12 years. Figures published by the Office for National Statistics also show that a record number of people claimed job seekers' allowance last month. The Austrian man on trial for fathering 7 children with his daughter has changed his plea to guilty on all charges. Josef Fritzl said he'd changed his mind after watching his daughter's videotaped testimony. He previously admitted incest, rape and false imprisonment. Faith, community and business leaders from Manchester have gathered to show their concern about the British National Party's European election campaign. They've signed a giant anti-BNP European election pledge card in the nave, of Manchester Cathedral. Figures included the Bishop of Bolton, the Bishop of Middleton, and the only black dean of a cathedral, Rogers Govender, from Manchester Cathedral. The BNP's calling the action an unnecessary and unholy intervention in the political process. Mark Davies, the Bishop of Middleton, says that the church is such a big part of people's lives, they need to get involved in politics sometimes too.
It's about the BNP and about any other force in every community that seeks division and hatred and blame, where I want to speak instead about hope and building strong local communities across Greater Manchester. It's a church issue because the church is deeply, deeply involved in the life of every community across Greater Manchester. That's why it's important. And not just for the Christian church, but for every faith community. Manchester is a very, very diverse place, and that's to be celebrated and rejoiced in.
Coal could be about to make a comeback as an energy source. A conference today is discussing the possible revival of the industry. Producers say they're more profitable than ever, and there are plans for new mines up and down the country. Former miner Alex from Swinton called us. He worked at Agecroft Colliery and was involved in the rescue efforts following the Goulburn Colliery explosion 30 years ago today. He says he isn't sure returning to coal's a good idea.
I worked in the coal mine for 25 years, and it was tough, hard work, but it was a dirty, dangerous job. And I remember as a kid, living in areas where there were coal fires and very smoky. Nice and romantic to see a coal fire. I mean, I've got a false one now, but I've got mixed feelings, quite frankly.
And the Manchester United star Ryan Giggs is to be awarded the Freedom of the City of Salford. The council said the footballer who lives in Worsley was a role model to young people and a proud ambassador for the city.
BBC Radio Manchester Sports with Dennis Lloyd.
The Oldham Chief Executive Alan Hardy has played down reports that John Wardle could be getting involved with Oldham Athletic. Hardy told BBC Radio Manchester that any interest from the former Manchester City chairman would be welcome, but reports of Wardle linking up with new manager Joe Royle are premature. Oldham, meanwhile, have secured the future of highly rated winger Chris Taylor. He's signed a new deal at Boundary Park until 2012. Manchester City striker Craig Bellamy will not feature in tomorrow's UEFA Cup last 16 tie with Aalborg. Some reports had suggested the Wales captain, who has been out since the start of the month with a knee injury, could make a surprise return in Denmark, but he didn't travel with the squad. Bolton midfielder Mark Davis will be out of action for several weeks after injuring his knee in Saturday's defeat against Fulham. Manager Gary Megson says he could return by the end of the season, though. Stockport striker Peter Thompson is back in training after being sidelined with a collapsed lung, and England manager Martin Johnson has named an unchanged team to play Scotland in Saturday's Calcutta Cup showdown, despite injury concerns over fly half Toby Flood and flanker Joe Worsley.
BBC Radio Manchester satellite weather with Heather Stott.
Well, this afternoon is going to be dry, and we'll see the cloud break to bring us some nice spells of sunshine from time to time. We've just got light winds, and it'll feel pleasantly warm, with top temperatures getting to 13 Celsius.
Lunchtimes belong to Beswick.
Allan Beswick.
BBC Radio Manchester.
Keith in Blackpool sent me an email saying, "Hi Alan, have you seen the article in the latest Private Eye, page 3, punishing bankers? In 1125 AD, King Henry got the Bishop of Salisbury to invite all the mint men of England," that's what bankers used to be called, and invited them to Winchester for Christmas. They were all deprived of their right hands and testicles. Now we give them a multi-million-pound pension. Well, that's that's progress, obviously. 161 228 2255. No, it's not funny. It's corporal punishment of the worst kind. So no, it isn't funny, but it is, isn't it? Funny in the end. Does it matter to you? Doesn't matter to me. Does it matter to you that 1 in 7 children in English schools, I can't speak for Scotland or Wales, but for Northern Ireland, but 1 in 7 kids in English schools don't have English as their first language? Now, that's not to say that they don't speak English. I'm sure many of them do. I'm equally sure that many of them do not. But 1 in 7 primary school pupils does not speak English as a first language. You remember Bradford all those years ago, and Ray Honeyford, the head teacher, who in the end lost his job because he wrote an article about the difficulties that the indigenous kids experience. He suggested, it was his contention, that the indigenous kids, if you like, white English kids, were being held back because the people, the children that had English not as their first language, and some had no English at all, teaching energies were going to have to go into that, and was going into that, and thus caused problems for the other children, because the curriculum was, if you like, disjointed. It was pulled in the sign. So, I don't know. You see, you know me, I just think it's fantastic. I think it's absolutely fantastic. A, that people hold my country, and I'm not a particularly, should we say, I'm not a particularly English person as such. I consider myself to be a European, ideally a citizen of the world, but no matter. But I think it's fabulous that the country I was born and brought up in looks so attractive to all these peoples from all around the world. I think that's fantastic. But then you think, well, OK, if you're going to come to the United Kingdom, if you're going to come and live in this country of ours, just like if I went to live in France, as I one day intend to do, or if I went to live in Italy, or anywhere else for that matter, I would do my utmost to learn the language. And these children are doing precisely that. But of course, we then have to look to their parents, because if English is not their first language, then clearly they're not speaking English at home. So how much of that is important? And in a way, in a strange way, on the same subject, you just heard in the news from Mark that the churches in Manchester have got together and they've got this thing for people to sign in the nave of the Manchester Cathedral where they effectively say, don't vote for the BNP. Now, the BNP are hoping to be riding high presently. They hope that they're going to, because of the proportional representation system, they hope that at the European elections in June, they just might, in the northwest, get one of their candidates to be their top candidate, that would be, of course, but to get one of their candidates elected to serve as an MEP for the northwest. And the churches have said, don't vote BNP. Is that the job of the church? The church can clearly talk about the... and you just heard the bishop, one of the bishops, doing exactly that. The church can claim to be the moral guide of our nation, the moral guide, if you like, of people within our nation. They can say to do this is right, to do this is wrong, you ought not to do this. But is it the job of a faith leader? I know they're not the other ones involved. Businesses are involved, and I'm sure the odd politician is knocking about and all. But is it the job of the church to say, don't vote for the BNP? And will the Conservative Party be doing what they did when the church implied that you ought not to vote Tory all those years ago? They didn't say don't vote Tory, they weren't that specific then. But they published the, what was it called, the inner city report from the churches, saying that poverty was rife in our inner cities and the government ought to change its policies and the like. And I remember the government of the day, Margaret Thatcher's government, saying the church should get on with filling the churches and get on their knees and pray and do all the rest of it, but they shouldn't be poking their nose into party politics. Now, their defence on that occasion was that it's not party politics. We are not telling you not to vote Tory. We are saying this is the state of our inner cities, and we've got a Tory government. That's what they were saying. That's what they were claiming. The Conservatives, of course, got on their high horse, quite rightly in my view, got on their high horse and said, no, it's not the job of the church to tell you who not to vote for, or indeed to tell you who to vote for. Well, that's precisely what the church is now doing. So are the Tories and the other parties going to come along and say, no, it is not the job of the church to say, don't vote BNP. It's the job of the church to say, do the things that are right, and maybe to explain their point of view of those things which are right, and the others which are wrong. But to say, don't vote BNP, Lord above, is that their job?
Welcome to my boardroom. Pressure. Are you tough enough to put up with it? I'm going to find out if you're the real deal. It'll be the hardest job interview you've ever had. But for one of you, it might be the last one you ever need.
The ultimate boardroom battle is back. To meet this year's candidates, go to bbc.co.uk/apprentice.
Oh dear, everybody gets really excited about that, don't they? The church should stick to fictional storytelling. It's what it does best. Email. Oh dear, fictional storytelling. I'm not getting involved. I always get far too many letters when that happens. It's just not on. I'm not having it. Phil Wallace has been having his say as well recently, hasn't he? He's been in and out of the papers, which is fair enough. He is a minister when all's said and done. He's also, of course, one of our MPs, but Phil Wallace is in the papers again today. He plans to halt, he said, he has a plan to halt migrants at Calais. He's got to the stage where he's had enough. He reckons there are too many people coming to the United Kingdom, and he's going to take action against it. And this is what he says. A joint Anglo-French détente centre... Sorry, détente. A joint Anglo-French detention centre is to be built outside Calais to deal with thousands of migrants trying to reach Britain, the immigration minister has claimed. Well, according to the Mail, and it will know, Wallace plan to halt migrants at Calais. Brackets. That's news to us, say the French immigration chiefs. Faltering Phil's gaffes. Faltering Phil. They were struggling for alliteration there, weren't they? But Faltering Phil's gaffes. Attacking the Office of National Statistics for releasing figures showing 1 in 9 people in Britain was born abroad He said the ONS's claim to have released the figures while they were... That's the Office of National Statistics, sorry. Claim to have released the figures while they were topical was at best naive, at worst sinister. That's one gaffe, according to the Mail. Statistics Authority watchdog defended the ONS, saying publication was consistent with its code of conduct and influenced by the level of public interest in the topic. So that was the reality of it. He said he shouldn't do it, and the authority whose job it is to examine such things said yes, they should. He claimed, according to the Mail, this government isn't going to allow the population to go up to 70 million. At some point, we will be able to set a limit on migration. They say he said that on October the 18th in 2008. The truth of it, according to them, official projections point to a population of 77 million by 2031. Britain cannot limit immigration within the EU or cap asylum claims. We all knew that. And then another gaffe. Same month, October, a good month, October the 22nd, 2008. Disestablishment of the Church of England, I think it will happen because it's the way things are going. It will probably take 50 years, but a modern society is multi-faith. The reality, again according to the Mail, his gaffe contradicted government policy and was quickly slapped down. A planned appearance on Question Time on BBC One was cancelled, so we might say he got off lightly. But he's now coming round to the way of thinking of many, and that is that there are far many people coming to the UK, and he's going to do all he can to stop it. Is he doing enough? Oh, no, I didn't. I meant to, Colin, but I didn't. Did you find out if we're still required by law to have our names on the electoral register? Last time I received a form to register, I recall reading it thoroughly, but there wasn't any indication that we were legally obliged to fill it in and return it. In other words, to be on the electoral register. I don't know. I should know that. I mean, Gordon Bennett, it's not a difficult bit of legislation, is it? I ought to know that. Sadly, I do not. Bill says, as long as their first language isn't Welsh, I'm not bothered about the 1 in 7 that don't speak English. That's Bill in Blakely. You'll get yourself in trouble with that, Bill. Well, you will. Longest case ever. Lance in Rochdale says, my mum Pearl has asked me to help you out again. Now, I remember I did the kangaroo court the other day. Here we go. Heck, at this rate, you're slowly becoming an old-fashioned uncle. Can you remember when you was a child and the ever-friendly neighbour was an uncle or an aunt? No, we never had that. We never had that. My mum, we called our blood relatives uncles and nobody else. Anyway, here we go. BBC News. The McLibel case, the longest case in English history. The European Court ruling that 2 activists should have been allowed legal aid in their libel case with McDonald's is just the latest. This is from the BBC News. It's just the latest of many twists in the longest case in English legal history. The case goes back to the mid-1980s and a public campaign attacking aspects of the fast food industry. And in 1986, the London Greenpeace Group, separate from the international Greenpeace movement, and including Helen Steele and David Morris, produced leaflets attacking McDonald's. Well, yes, that may well have been the longest case, because it went on to a variety of appeals and all the rest of it. But that's not what the question was, but I'm grateful to you for attempting to answer it nonetheless, because it reminded us of that news story that was a cracker. No. The question we're asking is, what is the longest time that a criminal has been brought to book after the offence? That was the question. So somebody commits an offence. What is the longest time for somebody who's committed an offence to be caught, brought to court and prosecuted? That's it. That's the question. What is the longest? Because, of course, they may well be... Well, it came out of this chap who's been released today after 27 years. Quite after 27 years. So, Sean Hodgson. Now, that crime was committed, give or take a day, 27 years ago. He was prosecuted for it, found guilty, convicted, locked up for 27 years. Of course, we now know it's not a case of there was a technical glitch in the evidence. He was not guilty. He wasn't guilty at the time, he's not guilty now. And the judge took the trouble to say the conviction was unsafe in every possible way. In other words, he never did it. He didn't do it. Now, the police are going to look use their DNA evidence now, which proves he didn't do it. He's going to use that DNA evidence and trawl it through a variety of web bases and databases and all the rest of it, and look, if necessary, at every man's DNA that they've got on file, in the hope of finding out who did it. And if they do, then that man will be brought to justice, and he'll be prosecuted, and let us presume guilty. So we're then looking at 27 years, if it's instant. But of course, if it takes 3 or 4 years to do, we're looking at touching 30. So that was the question. The question is not what's the longest case, but what is the longest period since the crime before someone is brought to justice? If you know the answer to that, 0161 228 2255, Radio Manchester at bbc.co.uk, and the text number, of course, always the same, 07786 206 951. And according to the Times, the Dead Sea Scrolls, do you remember them? Yeah, dug up by a farmer. I think he was minding his own business, wandering along with his plough, and these big rocks came out, and they had writing on them, and they're now called the Dead Sea Scrolls. Well, according to the Times, they're being re-examined, and different conclusions are being drawn. Scholars in uproar over challenge to the Dead Sea Scrolls. It's hard to get excited, isn't it? For more than 60 years, scholars have believed that the Dead Sea Scrolls were the work of an ascetic Jewish sect called the Essenes, E-S-S-E-N-E-S, Essenes, who lived in the 1st century in the mountains and recorded their religious observances on parchment. Now a new theory, challenging the broadly accepted history, is sending shockwaves through the archaeological community, even leading to the arrest of one prominent Scrolls scholar's son in the United States. Rachel Elior, a professor of Jewish philosophy at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem, claims in a forthcoming study that not only were the 930 scrolls written by Jewish priests living in Jerusalem, but that the essences, that sect that previously were thought to have written them, never even existed. Archaeology. Not exactly precise, is it? 1:20 on BBC Radio Manchester. News headlines. Mark Edwards.
A 57-year-old man's had his conviction quashed after spending almost 30 years in prison for a murder he didn't commit. The BNP's criticised the Church of England in Manchester after clergymen called on voters not to support the party in June's Euro elections. And the Manchester United legend Ryan Giggs is to be awarded the freedom of the city of Salford. Manchester's weather, some sunshine's promised, temperatures reaching around about 13 Celsius.
BBC Radio Manchester, 2020 traffic.
Well, let's take a look to traffic cameras on the M62. Still fairly misty around 22 at Rishworth Moor. That broken down vehicle on the A556, the A530, it seems, has now been recovered, thankfully. And if you're planning on using the trains, cross-country, London Midland and Virgin train services are all affected by problems with line-side equipment in the Stone area, so delays of up to 30 minutes can be expected between Stoke-on-Trent and Birmingham New Street. Don't forget, though, if you can update me, it's 0161 244 4951. I'm Cara Banks.
2020 traffic means you get an update every 20 minutes through the day. BBC Radio Manchester.
A very good day to you. Chris in Atherton. Hiya, Chris.
Hello, Alan, all right?
Not bad.
Just, a few thoughts on whether the church should get involved. I know it's a bit of a thorny subject and it's a bit prickly, but I can't basically see anything wrong. I know my own church, the Catholic Church, will tell, without like a veiled threat, if you like, will say, don't vote for candidates who uphold abortion and things like that. Now, some think they shouldn't, and they tell you not to, they won't get involved in party politics. Yet in the South American countries where they had a preferential option for the poor in the 1960s, I know some were against that, but for me, this is my way of looking at it. If my faith just says to me, there's a great place, if you like, in the hereafter, the great promised land, it doesn't say much about my life on earth if I don't let it affect my life on earth. If my faith does not affect my decisions in life, does not bring me to a point where I have to look at things morally, and that's where I then seek guidance from my bishops and my priests and my pope, etc., then really my faith is useless to me. So I think it's right that the church should get involved. To me, the two greatest things in life are religion and politics, and I find them so intermixed that I can't split them, because if my faith doesn't affect my political view, then my faith must be useless, because I'm making a dichotomy between the two, and I shouldn't.
Well, it's difficult to argue with a single word you've just said. Indeed.
Don't say that.
Well, hang on, I've not stopped.
Right, go on.
And you were right about priests in South American countries. Indeed, there was even occasions where priests in South American countries stood for political office.
That's correct.
Which is generally frowned upon.
It is, yes.
But the difficulty some people might have with what's going on in Manchester presently isn't that the church is saying, look, what the BNP believe is unchristian and unacceptable. They're entitled to say that. But I'm wary, and I think many others are wary, of the church, the organisation, saying that you shouldn't vote for that party or that party or that party. Maybe they should. There's no question. As I say, I agree with you emphatically. Yes, they should definitely say this is the way morality should go.
That's
and
right.
Racism is unacceptable and all of that. But to tell somebody not to vote BNP, I'm afraid, is probably, in many people's eyes, a step too far.
Oh, and I can understand why they would say that. It's just that, obviously, I'm speaking from the perspective of me believing I have faith. Now, I would probably have to say to those people, well, you don't have the faith, but I do understand where you're coming from. But if you don't give moral guidance to... And again, I'm wondering whether these people who are saying not vote for the National Front, BNP, sorry, whether they're looking back to 1933 and how the Nazi Party came about in Germany. The church should have spoke up then, and all other people who had any complexity of what life's all about should have said, this can't be right, but they didn't, did they? And look what happened with Nazi Germany.
Well, absolutely. But
so I suppose that's the fear that they're living under.
But the BNP is a legally constituted party.
That's correct.
Frankly, I'd be happy if it wasn't, but it is. And I don't know whether it is the job of the church to say, do not vote for somebody that is legally constituted.
Well, I find I have to accept that statement because I feel that myself. But then the other part of me says, but if they don't give me moral guidance, if they don't say to people, well, what are you going to do? Well, I'm not sure. Then, do you remember in Lee a few years back when we had the poll tax?
I do.
And there was a Father Jerry Fitzgerald, and he was dead against the poll. He got in trouble with the church, but he backed up his parishioners who wouldn't pay the poll tax, and he stood toe-to-toe with them. And he stood square with them, and as it proved, the poll tax was so iniquitous that they got rid of it, didn't it?
Well...
I know it's not the same thing, but they're political views, aren't they?
They are political views, but there's a difference between political views and the
political party, I know.
And party political views. Now, my father and my mother have never told me to not vote BNP or National Front or even Conservative. Right. They've never told me that, but they've given me all the moral guidance I will ever need.
Of course.
So I know that I will never vote BNP because, in my view, it is an immoral organisation. But that's just my view.
I know it is.
The priest can do that. The church can do that. The church...
Well, I suppose they think that's what they're doing, telling people not to vote for it.
Well, I don't think they are. They're actually saying don't vote for... If you say don't vote for the BNP have other policies than those which some would describe as racist. They have other policies.
I know they do.
Now, some of the policies they purport to have, and I've never examined it, so don't know the yay or the nay of it, but some of the policies they purport to have, frankly, are quite attractive.
That's right. That's right. They will be.
Quite attractive.
They will be.
So...
I know it swings and roundabouts, but what the argument is, I know it's a thorny subject, but I believe that church leaders should be speaking out, especially now, because there's a massive moral decline in this country, and we all have our views on how that's come about, and I'm not going to speak on that today. But the massive moral decline, if the BNP could take seats because of that, because of the lack of moral guidance, if you like, and what's going on with the capitalist system, etc., etc. And I'm really against the capitalist system, but I don't believe that the people of the world will ever vote for any system other than the capitalist system, because I believe that's what people want.
All right, good on you. Thank
All
you
right.
very much indeed, Chris.
Okay.
Kay in
Can I just say
Salford.
one more thing, Alan?
Go on.
There were just, I said to you, your chap who I spoke to before.
My lackey. We like to call him my lackey.
Right. Well, I watched it. It's not party political, but it's just to me shows what the church should do. I watched a programme by Ian Hislop, who I don't particularly like, but nevertheless, and he was on about a bloke in the First World War who, when he died in this country, there was a massive outpouring of grief for him, and his name became known as Woodbine Willie. And he walked around the trenches in the First World War, ministering to the men. He was a Church of England vicar and giving them woodbines. And his name was Willie, so that's how Willie Woodbine came about. Yeah.
Right.
So that's to me, that's what the church should be doing. No matter what rank or position you hold in the church, I believe that's where the church should stand, foursquare with the people it represents.
Well, that sounds like the policy of the Sally Bash. Good to talk to you, Chris. Cheers, mate. Have a good day. Kay, a female, describes herself as Kay, says, indeed it is the job of the church to tell people not to vote for the BNP. It's the job of the church to issue guidance on moral issues, and I don't think there are many who would doubt that the BNP policy is packed with moral and human issues. The church generally sits on the fence, not a comfortable position for people of conscience, and it should come off more often. It's not as if its pronouncements carry the force of civil law, thus infringing freedoms of this, that, and the other. That's K. Well, you can give moral guidance without giving party political guidance, can't you? Barry in Middleton. Hiya, Barry.
Hi, Alan. I'll keep it as short as I can, but I've so much to say. I've even more now after listening to the last chap, who I didn't agree with at all.
All right, go on.
I do believe he has the right to say it. And I also believe that the BNP have a right to be heard. I'm not a member of the BNP. I don't know. I know quite a bit. I've read the manifesto, and I disagree with you very strongly on this, but that's not why I'm ringing up. I'm ringing up because to tell the church leaders to keep their nose out of politics. I won't have anybody, no matter who they are, telling me who or not to vote for. Because the church is principally concerned with people's souls. I'll do that in quotes. Because I have nothing to do with the church. I don't want anything to do with it. But I did read a good quote the other day, and it said that absolute faith corrupts as absolutely as absolute power. And I do believe that's true. They shouldn't be allowed to run unfettered. They should keep the noses out of politics. It's got nothing to do with them at all.
We have to wonder what your definition of politics is. For example, if the church, and most churches I've heard of do, if the church said we should collect money from those who are quite well off and use it to give succour to the poor, that's actually political. It's not party political, but it's political.
No church, particularly the Roman Catholic Church, they say we should give money, but we'll keep it. They're not magnanimous they're not magnanimous.
That really isn't fair. I'm a man of no faith whatsoever, but
I know you are, Alan.
But that really isn't fair. Most of the churches, the Roman Catholic Church, the Salvation Army, Church of England, even the Jewish Church, we don't call it a church, but you know what I mean, the Jewish faith and Islam, they do lots and lots and lots of things for people with the money they've raised.
I don't think they do, Alan. Well, there are certain ones. I'll go along with the Muslims and the Jews. The Church of England and the Roman Catholic Church, they're too busy clawing their way to safety because they're going rapidly down the grid, aren't they?
Certainly they are struggling for what we might call turning up members, but I've got to say we'll just disagree.
The one thing they'll always make money on the church is christenings. I know so many people have never been in a church, not even to get married, but they still have a christening. Well, David Beckham's classic quote, and I like Beckham now.
Go on.
His classic quote was, "We are certainly going to have Brooklyn christened. We just haven't decided into what religion yet."
Yes, indeed. Well, Barry, you've got a lousy line anyway.
Just one thing before I go. The late 50s, early 40s, early 60s in Smethwick in Birmingham.
Yeah.
It was a disgraceful campaign, so nothing's new. What goes around comes around. Nothing's new. I think it was the Tory party, I might be wrong, who had a disgraceful slogan, and it said, "If you want an N-word for a neighbour, vote Labour."
I remember that. I remember that campaign.
So nothing's different, is it, Alan?
Nothing indeed. The world stays the same, and that's reassuring enough bizarre sort of a way. Good on you, Barry.
Nice to talk.
Cheers, mate. He says that... Well, I disagree with him. He says that the church, frankly, is just a grasping bunch of people grabbing money for themselves. I disagree emphatically with that, but that's just the way the world is. I've said many times, I think religion is an overwhelming, a massively, massively overwhelming force for good in our society. Whatever that faith might be, religion is an overwhelming force for good in our society. And when you get into the rougher end of society, and people do, when you get in the rougher end of society, you often find a God-botherer fully immersed in it. You do. You do. And I learned something the other day that was absolutely extraordinary. I was talking to a bloke, apropos of nothing, just minding my own business, talking to him. And he and his wife are involved in a little charity, and I mean little, that raises money to help a school for kids in India, a very poor school for kids in India, apropos of nothing. And he told me out of the blue, for no reason, and I know he's not a member, for no reason, that the local Freemasons gave them 500 quid. And I thought, good on them. Good on them. Absolutely fantastic. Well, there you are. Stephen, according to this article, it is illegal not to be registered to vote in this country. Here's the article from Steve. It is illegal not to register to vote in this country, although many people choose not to for various reasons and avoid punishment. The result of registration is the electoral roll, a public record of where each voter lives that has proved a goldmine to junk mail firms, marketing people and journalists over the years. Now Britons have the option not to appear on the publicly available list and instead only to appear on a restricted version for the use by the authorities. But credit reference agencies successfully argued that they should have access to this unabridged version. The electoral roll provides a history of every place you've ever lived. Choose not to register and you will struggle to get even the smallest amount of credit. So there you are. So according to that article, and indeed to Stephen, it is against the law to not be registered to vote, providing, of course, you are entitled to vote. It would be a bit harsh to arrest visitors for not being on the electoral register. So if you are a subject of Her Majesty in this country, a resident subject of Her Majesty, then you are entitled to vote and you are required to register on the electoral register. And you're even entitled to vote and to register on the electoral register if you are a subject of Her Majesty and live abroad. In fact, one of the senior Tories it might have been Eric Pickles, but I could be wrong. One of the senior Tories recently went on a bit of a tour around the world to get people, expats as we call them, to register to vote. So yeah, they can. And indeed, if you're in this country and you don't register, it is an offence. So we've got to the bottom of that, because that's what we do, isn't it? Oh, you'll like this. The Financial Services Authority. Can you hear the sound of a stable door closing? One that's not got an horse in it, obviously. The Financial Services Authority has announced wide-ranging changes in the way banks are regulated. And a report on the future of the FSA, its new chairman, Lord Turner, said there needed to be a more intrusive approach, intense supervision of banks and new rules to control their pay policies and ensure they held much higher levels of capital. Yeah. Lord Turner said there'd also be more stringent controls on previously unregulated firms like hedge funds. Yes. No, it's not a black horse, it's all the horses have bolted. There is a danger, he said, that as we tighten regulation on banks, activities might move to non-regulated sectors. And that makes it essential that we regulate according to economic substance, not legal form. That we do not again allow in the future off-balance sheets, structured investment vehicles to run large risks without adequate controls or investment banks to escape leverage ratio constraints. Dear God, he actually said that. No, I've no idea. It must mean something. If you know what it means, then do feel free. I found myself out of work 12 years ago. I've been working self-employed, but exclusively for a single company. When I approached the benefits office at the local job centre, I was informed by a very embarrassed lady that they could offer me nothing, not even any form of retraining, unless I had a disability or English was my second language. Fortunately, I found alternative employment within the week, perhaps because I was entitled to nothing. With hindsight, they did me a favour. OK. I've never been unemployed. It must be quite horrible. I've not. I've never been without a job, other than if I've been going from job A to job B and decided to sit on my back end for the intervening period. But I know. I'm not suggesting it's anything on my part. I just never have. It's just not worked out that way. I've always left a job to go to another. I did once get sacked, but got another job within a few weeks. And another occasion got sacked and represented myself at the appeal, the in-house appeal of the company, and was quite rightly reinstated. That was a good moment. That was quite fun, because I wasn't entitled to any unemployment benefit because I'd been sacked. But when I was reinstated, I was then entitled to the unemployment benefit because I'd been sacked unjustly. So I got the money. But then I got my wages as well, because it was perfectly legitimate. The company said, we're reinstating you, and I said, well, fine. It's your fault I was out, not mine, so we'll have the wages, thank you. And they had to pay them. So I got paid about 3 times during that week. It was quite good fun. I was quite looking forward to getting sacked again. 0161 228 2255. I don't know the answer to your question. That's often the case. But you may find this interesting. That's Peter in Winsford. And then he tells me what I might find interesting. Well, I'll read it out in a minute and see if you do as well. But right now, it's 20 to 2 on BBC Radio Manchester. News headlines with Michelle Adams.
An investigation's underway after human remains were found on land in Collyhurst. Police were alerted on Monday night after a skull was seen near to Rochdale Road. Work's now underway to recover bones, and officers say they expect to be at the site for some time. The Manchester Diocese of the Church of England has signed a pledge to fight the BNP. It's joined leaders from other faiths in Greater Manchester who are urging voters not to support the far-right party at the Euro elections in June. Unemployment's risen above 2 million for the first time in 12 years, and Manchester's weather a dry afternoon with some sunny periods with highs of 13 Celsius.
BBC Radio Manchester 2020 traffic.
Well, let's take a look around the cameras on the M6 firstly, all moving well through Cheshire up as far as junction 23 at Haydock. Not doing too badly on the M60 Ring Road, still a bit murky on the M62 over the Pennines though. And don't forget, if you can update me, then do call in on 0161 244 4951. I'm Cara Banks.
BBC Radio Manchester Sports with Dennis Lloyd.
Good afternoon. The Oldham Chief Executive Alan Hardy has played down reports that John Wardle could be linking up with manager Joe Royle and getting involved with Oldham Athletic. Hardy told BBC Radio Manchester that any interest from the former Manchester City chairman would be welcome, but reports of planned formal talks and investment from Wardle is premature. Manchester City manager Mark Hughes has ruled Craig Bellamy out of making a surprise return in the UEFA Cup tomorrow. Some reports had suggested the striker, out since the start of the month with a knee injury, could feature in the last 16 tie against Aalborg after recovering quicker than expected. But Bellamy didn't travel with the rest of the squad to Denmark. Bolton midfielder Mark Davies will be out of action for several weeks after injuring his knee in Saturday's defeat against Fulham. Manager Gary Megson is uncertain as to how long he'll be sidelined, but is hopeful he'll be back by the end of the season. The Hull City manager Phil Brown says he stands by his comments that he saw Cesc Fabregas spit at his assistant Brian Horton following last night's FA Cup defeat at Arsenal. Horton plans to speak to the League Managers Association about the alleged incident in the tunnel, and Brown says the club will back him if he decides to take the matter further.
Brian Horton is the assistant manager of Hull City and will receive the full support of the people of Hull. That includes my chairman, who we had a long conversation with this morning. Do you want to make a mountain out of a molehill? Do you want to make a big deal of it? That's entirely your business. As far as we're concerned, we'll go down the right channels, right direction for to support Brian Horton.
Oldham have secured the long-term future of Chris Taylor. The highly rated winger has signed a new contract until 2012 and comes after the Latics rejected bids for the player in January. Ipswich goalkeeper Shane Supple will today complete a loan deal until the end of the season at Boundary Park. Stockport could have Peter Thompson back before the end of the season. The county striker has returned to light training after being sidelined for several weeks with a collapsed lung. Manchester City's youth team face Arsenal at Eastlands tonight in the first leg of their FA Youth Cup semi-final. City's academy director Jim Cassell is hoping his side can progress.
We're delighted. We won the trophy last year. We're in the last four this year. We got to the final 2 years ago, so we've had a reasonable run in recent years, but being greedy, we want to go on and see if we can lift the trophy again.
And there'll be regular reports in Manchester Reloaded tonight from 7. Manchester United goalkeeper Edwin van der Sar has turned down the chance to come out of international retirement. Holland boss Bert van Marwijk has revealed he contacted the 38-year-old about playing in their World Cup qualifier against Scotland on Saturday week. Bury manager Alan Neil is predicting an exciting end to the promotion race in League Two. The Shakers have slipped to 5th following last night's results. Neil says he's thriving on the pressure.
We're in decent form. There's plenty of teams in the league that would want that. It's exciting, and it's so much better to have something to play for. 9 games left and plenty to play for, so I'd much prefer it that way.
The fastest man on earth, Usain Bolt, is to run in Manchester in May. The Olympic champion and world record holder is to compete in a street sprint in the city on the weekend of the 10k run. It'll be a 150-metre event on a specially laid track against some of the top sprinters in the world. Salford second-row forward Ian Sibbett has avoided a ban after testing positive for a banned substance. The 28-year-old former Warrington player has been reprimanded by the Rugby Football League for overuse of the drug salbutamol in his battle with asthma. And England manager Martin Johnson has named an unchanged team to play Scotland in Saturday's Calcutta Cup showdown. Despite injury concerns over fly half Toby Flood and flanker Joe Worsley, it means Sales, Andrew Sheridan and Mark Quater once again start at Twickenham. And Johnson says that England's convincing win over France at the weekend has given his side a new confidence.
When you win, it just makes things easier. I think it showed what we knew deep down already, but we hadn't demonstrated on the field often enough that what we're trying to do will work if we execute it well enough. We've not got ahead of ourselves at all this week. There's plenty of things we can get better at on the field, a lot better at, not just little tweaks. And, we keep working hard.
The next live action on the Northwest's biggest sports station.
There's report of City in the FA Youth Cup tonight, then commentary on the first team in their UEFA Cup tie with Aalborg from tomorrow at 6.
BBC Radio Manchester.
Aye, all right. Good-o. So we started reading that email about the statute of limitations. You'll like this. I don't know the answer to your question. Well, OK, we know what the question was. There is a concept in the UK that time does not run against the Crown. Essentially, says Peter, this means that there is no limitation period for the more serious offences. The Jack the Ripper case, the original one, is technically still an open case and capable of prosecution. But as Peter says, I don't think it's likely that any charges will now be brought. But yet it's still an open case, and if they could resolve it, they would. From what some states class as misdemeanours, and yes, we used to have that as well, he says, there are time limits for bringing a prosecution. These vary and are written into the legislation that creates the offence. A usual limitation period is around 6 months, but some are as short as 7 days. It's an interesting old system, don't you think? Yes, Peter, it is an interesting system. And the place we see it most common and most frequent is in traffic offences, of course. If you go through a camera today and you've not received notification in 3 months' time, you ain't gonna. It'll be out of time. And even if you do and you get the notice of intended prosecution, then they've only got 6 months to bring you to court. And if they're out of time, for whatever reason, if they're out of time, the situation dies. Alan, says Alan in Cheshire, why do people continue to harp on about the community charge being iniquitous? Everyone who benefited from council services was asked to pay for them. What's wrong with that? Says Alan in Cheshire. Well, there's no such thing as an equitable tax. There are a number of ways of interpreting the word equitable, if you like, or interpreting what's fair. The poll tax, not the tax we've got now, but the poll tax that was proposed by the government of the day all those years ago, was that every single adult in the community would have to pay a charge. There would be a minimum, and there would be some help for people who couldn't afford it, but everybody would have to pay a bit. Was one way of doing it, saying everybody carries their share, so that a household with 6 people living in it paid more than a household with 1. Understandable, perfectly legitimate. We in this country tend to take into account a person's ability to pay. So they were saying things like, if you've got 6 people living in a 2 up, 2 down in Manchester, and then on the outskirts of Manchester you've got one man living in his 6-bedroomed house in the middle of 40 acres of land, he will pay 1/6 of the community charge that other family pays. Now, he'll only use probably 1/6 of the resources, but it, to some, seemed unjust. That's it. So, one man's fairness is another man's definitely not fair. Andrew says, can I just clarify, there is no obligation under law for an individual to sign the electoral register. But you are obliged to sign the electoral register if you want to vote. The law regarding the electoral register, or the laws, are who can be on it and who must be. It's not one of who must be, so the law is about who can be on it rather than who must be on it, according to Andrew. The electoral register is the list of everyone who's registering to vote in a local area. Electoral registration takes place on a local basis by each local authority electoral registration officer. The electoral register is updated on a monthly basis, except between August and November, when local authorities perform an annual canvass of their area. You can register vote at any time of the year by contacting your local authority to ask for a registration form. So there you are. According to Andrew, it's not a legal requirement. According to others, it is. So we are still no further forward, which is it's precisely where I like to be.
Life and laughs with Eamon and Jimmy.
Can you believe this guy's luck? I've just read about him. Unbelievably lucky. First of all, he wins 10 million quid on the lottery on Wednesday, and then he finds love 2 days later.
Eamon O'Neill and Jimmy Wag.
I got home yesterday and I found the dog dead inside the washing machine. I'm absolutely gutted, but at least he died in comfort.
Eamon and Jimmy.
What did one hat say to the other hat? You wait here while I'll go on ahead.
If your radio sounds funny on Sunday morning, you must be listening to Eamon O'Neill and Jimmy Wag.
We're having that one.
Yeah, we're having that, definitely.
Sunday morning from 9.
At BBC Radio Manchester.
I can't help thinking, says David, that when older men fancy Joan Bakewell, they are patting themselves on the back since she was referred to as the thinking man's crumpet. Did you know that Joan was born Joan Dawson Rowlands in 1933 in Stockport? Well, I didn't know when she was born, and I didn't know her last name, but I did know she was born in Stockport. Turns out she was brought up in Bakewell Street. Could that possibly be where the name came from, one would think? And then David goes on to say she had an affair with Harold Pinter, and afterwards he wrote the play Betrayal. She then wrote, seeing it is 2 experiences for me. Pleasure at the brilliant and amusing play, and heartache at the retelling of events from my own life. She wrote that, apparently, in the New Statesman in 2003. Well, thank you for that. If you're wondering why I'm reading things out about Joan Bakewell, it's because I mentioned her earlier, because Dame Joan Bakewell, as she is now, is tomorrow producing Heather Stott's programme. Yeah. As a sort of guest producer. So that'll be nice. Function, sod all. That's another view of the initials FSA, the Financial Services Authority. Just an opinion, says Adrian. But how wrong is it? Function, sod all. Yeah, very good, we like that. It's on the edge of humour, and we like on the edge of humour. Sweet Jesu himself, says Damo. Sweet Jesu himself brought politics and religion into the mix. He was at odds with both the political and religious authorities of the day, playing them off one another and getting people to join him along the way. He was definitely a political activist. But he wasn't related to the big fella, insert as appropriate. It may then be the church's right to stick their nose in. Let's face it, we would be in a different place if the church was not allowed to air its views. Well, yes, I suppose in the fact that he was against the authority of the day, the rulers of the religion, but not the country, of course. The country was ruled by the Romans at the time, but yes, he was against the elders of the church and the Pharisees and all that gubbins. And that could very easily be described, and was by them described, as a political matter. Okay. Nobody's suggesting that the church should not speak on political matters, for all matters are political, and it would be impossible for them to speak at all if they were confined to matters that were not political. The thing that goes wrong is the party political. That's when it gets dodgy. If your church, the leader of your church, tells you who to vote for, that is unacceptable, because you may well be one of those people that believes your faith has, or the sort of minister of your faith has a God-given right to tell you what to vote. And clearly, they do not. Yes, they can give you moral guidance. That is what they are for. They can give us all moral guidance whether we worship or not. They can and should give us all moral guidance whether we worship or not. They can tell us and teach us the difference between right and wrong, of course. But should the church ever tell us which way not to vote? Surely that is a matter for our conscience. They can inform the conscience. 'Tis we that has to use it, surely. 0161 228 2255. There's a lovely story in the papers today. Well, I enjoyed it anyway. We're always hearing about racism and all the rest of it. A Scottish pilot is suing British Airways over claims he was racially abused by his English middle-class colleagues. Captain Douglas Morn alleges he was sent offensive letters and called a jock who should go back to Scotland. So calling somebody a jock now is presumably deemed to be racist. He claims BA had a canteen culture of racism, and that one captain referred to Saudi passengers as, and then gives an expression. The trouble started when Mr. Mann defended Labour's economic record in a letter to the staff magazine BA News in 2005. He said an English pilot who he'd never met started sending him racially abusive letters and emails about his views. Well, now he's making a claim. He's claiming that he's been racially abused. Yeah, in one three-page handwritten letter on notepaper from the luxury Singapore Hotel Raffles, the pilot said, "Come separation, we'll all jocks F off to that welfare state paid for by the English middle classes. Please say yes." He's taking BA, the self-proclaimed world's favourite airline, to an employment tribunal on the grounds he was victimised racially. He said he regularly tried to alert senior management to the abuse, but was told it was a private matter between two individuals. Have we really reached the stage where Scottish people now are what we might call are a minority group who need our protection? Surely not. I hope they're a minority group that needs our protection at the weekend when England play them, but that's an entirely different matter. Oh, come on. There has to be an end to it, doesn't there? There has to be an end. Alan, the poll tax was basically good, but flawed in its application. Some countries have a wealth tax, which takes into account all your circumstances worldwide. Fabulous. I'd do very well in that. I ain't got two halfpennies rubbed together, so I'd do fantastic in that. A wealth tax, not a poverty tax, which is, I suppose, what we have now. Well, we do. It is bizarre, but poor people, people on low incomes, pay a bigger proportion of their wages in taxes of one form or another than do rich people. A bigger proportion. Now that's, even though rich people pay as much as 40% income tax, poor people pay more as a proportion, because A, their wages are small, and B, every time they go out and buy something, of course, they're spending exactly the same amount. If I go and buy a bottle of beer, then I'm paying the same amount of tax as does a multimillionaire, as does somebody struggling along on 60 quid on unemployment benefits. So that's how the equation works out. So yes, people on low incomes spend a greater proportion of their income on taxation than do the rich. So I suppose you could say that is unjust. But of course, in our country, we don't believe in taxing the rich, do we? We don't. We believe in saying we're going to tax the rich. We tax the rich and give it to the poor. We have a sort of Robin Hood attitude to taxation. Take it off the rich, give it to the poor. But whether that actually happens, well, that's entirely different. Only you can tell us that. Oh, Hampshire police have now launched an investigation into the death of the woman that Sean Hodgson was convicted of murdering 27 years ago. So we're right there. That's nice, isn't it? And I do hope they find whoever did it. I hope they find him, and I hope they take him to court and punish him. I hope they don't find him and discover that he's dead. But whatever happens, you would hope that it'll be an awful lot easier with the DNA they've got now. But of course that requires that they have the DNA of the suspect on file. Let us hope they do, and that at least will be, well, some justice for the family, if not much. See you tomorrow. Ta-ra.
From Stockport High.